Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, my guest today was a featured guest a few months ago, anyway. And we were really talking about his entrepreneurial ventures and that of him being the president and CEO of a company called Kitewire. Since that time, he has launched another company, or actually, I don't want to say since that time, he had a baking quietly in the background, but he launched this other company. It's called Atlas Up, and it's largely an AI based organization. So AI is a really hot topic today. Most of us or just don't understand the full power of AI, the impact it's going to have on business and whatnot. So I want to bring in one of the leading experts in the AI space, Jere Simpson, so we can talk a little bit more about AI, the impact it's going to have on the business, things that you need to prepare for in the future so that you're working with AI, not against AI. And that's a really big distinction right there. So, Jere Simpson, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good to see you, my friend. So good to be back with you.
Absolutely. Talked about the importance of making sure that you're working with AI and not against AI.
Yeah, I mean, it would be similar to SaaS being like having software available through the internet, not going to Circuit City and getting a CD-ROM that you stick into your computer. Disrupted a lot of businesses, mobile disrupted a lot of businesses, and AI disrupted a lot of businesses. But the ones that really thrived, like Netflix, for example, are the ones that really said, "Oh, let's just get on top of this thing and not fight it and figure out how it supercharges us instead of trying to pretend like it's not going to be the way of the future." I think
Sure. I've
Netflix is
told
actually a
people.
really great example, of Blockbuster didn't go that way. Netflix got started with a really great innovation, sending DVDs through the mail, and almost instantly turned their entire business upside down to go to streaming.
Sure. The metaphor that I've always shared with people who've asked me questions about AI, as I said, we can either stand next to the rocket ship of AI, or you can just stand on top of the rocket ship and go along with it. The business winners, the ones that have found ways to leverage AI at every level of the company, whether you're an assistant all the way up to the CEO, finding ways to leverage AI. It's because it increases efficiencies and productivity and a whole bunch of other things.
Wow, I think creativity is actually quite in question. It's really hard to say. It really comes down to what defines creativity. It
Ooh, that's
it
a good
is
one.
very yeah, like what is it that actually defines creativity? It's interesting to see examples of saying The Onion made a post, and the post was a satirical thing like The Onion does, where it was just about Chat GPT passes the bar and is destined for a life of legal work, even though its dreams were to become like a creative writer. But the interesting thing was the whole article was written by ChatGPT in the style of The Onion. And it instantly, it kicked out like four versions until the editors were like, this is only one.
Let me jump in for a second, though. So, what creates the painting? Is it the paint, the brush, or the person controlling the brush? So, the prompt is the person controlling
Mhm.
the brush,
Very
right?
true.
So,
Very,
the
very
Onion's
true.
article would have been based on the prompt.
Yeah, very true. The example I was about to give, I think you could say the same thing on. This was so I got introduced to GPT in 2018 by Sam Altman, who's the co-founder of OpenAI. He's an LP
Oh,
in,
you
in a fund
lucky
that
SOB.
I got. This is just great luck. We're both LPs in a venture fund. The strategy paid off. The whole reason I'm in the fund was not to make money on the fund, but because of the other people in the fund. And I just wanted to get invited to the meetings and talk with the other people. And
Yeah.
Sam was one of those. I'm like, this totally paid off. Like, who cares what happens with the money? Who cares how the fund performs, which actually performs quite well. Meeting Sam and seeing what GPT-1 was doing at the time blew my mind. I had a friend who had just a company where she does cocktails for like caters cocktail parties. And I was showing her the power of this. At this time, it was GPT-2. And I said, just tell me about your business. And it's going to write a marketing thing. And so it writes the whole marketing post about her business, and it adds in there. I was just asking for marketing. I wasn't asking for new ideas. And, I don't know. I think we'll have to see how it goes. But my overall thinking is humans are incredibly intricate computers. And there are going to be advantages that the machine has in power and like memory and depth of knowledge. But the computers aren't going to have anytime soon as all the sensors that we have. And we still have pretty poor sensors for capturing vision and capturing sound. But those are the best ones we have. We don't capture any of the other senses. And we also have this built in, a lot of people think, gosh, we have this deficit where A human is born, they know nothing, they have like a 20-year ramp up of collecting all the knowledge. And that's going to be a major setback for people against the machines. And I actually think that might be our secret weapon. That's like our built in collective neuroplasticity. Some of the greatest ideas that we have come from 20-year-old, as I would say, kids. They're technically adults, but because their assumptions are blown away and they look at things with fresh eyes and come up with new ideas far beyond what we even understand and far beyond what I think the machines are going to be able to understand and replicate. I don't know that AI is going to be able to figure out what is all of the magic of the computers that we're born with and how does it even replicate something like that with silicon and whatnot. And so I think we're going to be surprised at what we're capable of when we delegate so much work to the robots.
I agree. And I also think that we're going to see a great divide. We are going to see a certain group of people getting dumber and another group of people getting far more intelligent. And we're already starting to see that now at a very basic level, and that's what it is. But then there are going to be those other people, and I suspect you're one of these people who enters in a prompt, and then you get the output, and then you push the barrier a little bit. And you're like, wait a minute, let's make this output even better. Let's make it think harder and become more strategic and become more creative. And you'll take the output and you'll change a variable and you'll say, what if you were to do this? Or what if you were to do this? And you'll layer on these prompts, or you'll say, I want you to learn this information for context and then give me the output. Now, all of a sudden, when you think about what you're creating, like that's where it takes significant amount like that. I don't even know if you want to call it creative thinking or critical thinking or a combination of both. Depends.
Yeah,
Right,
what's
right.
interesting, I often think of whatever right now in the situation that we're in right now, whatever you throw into ChatGPT, for example, as your shitty first rough draft. And
I don't know.
you can get 5 rough drafts that just start the creative process and cherry pick out of it is what you want to run with. And the first thing that people need to realize is that in its current instantiation, GPT-4, for example, has about 40% hallucination rate, which means it just starts making up BS. And so you should always spot check everything it says. It also says it with a lot of authority. So people are going, seems pretty sure. Most of the time, it's just ripping a blog post, from somebody who you don't know if they actually know what they're talking about or not, and regurgitates it. It's like an amplifier. You normally need a small staff to research things and bring ideas back to you. It's going to do that for you. And you don't have to pay people to do it. It can do it instantly. There are already, I don't know if you've heard of AutoGPT or Baby AGI. For those that don't know,
Yeah.
AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And Baby AGI is in no way. But what's interesting is they basically give it a thought process. Like, first I do this, then I check that, and then I run it against my ethics. And you can make up anything you want to. And it's meant to be an autonomous thing that keeps refining until it feels like it's pretty conclusive. And those are really interesting because it's mimicking what a person does. But what will be really cool is in 6 months' time when you get to tell it what your frameworks are thinking. And I think the frameworks that we all have uniquely to solve a problem is really what makes us special. I ask a couple people, I vet this ideas, I check it against my core values, I whatever else, and then which one of these maps best, and I give it my whole process. And I think it's going to be, again, like an 80% solve doing that. Hey, listen, if I was your process, I'm going to run a quick and dirty one. The answer looks like this. If you just want to go with it because the risk is low, go with it. If the risk is high, then probably you want to run it through your own human process. I think that's going to get really fascinating as we work through our own isms of problem solving. And I think it also brings up, when we're teaching kids, the last thing we need to do. I mean, I just completely abstained from the school system because as I was in it, all I saw was that they were trying to teach knowledge. I got the internet in 1990, and which was very early, and I could see knowledge was about to be free and abundant. It wasn't there yet, but in a handful of years, knowledge was going to be the cheapest thing in the world. Critical thinking is the only thing that we need to be doing. And so I get disgusted when I see the New York school system has banned ChatGPT from. I'm like, all I want you to do with my children is throw problems at them and let them solve it any moral way possible.
Yes. My son and I are having that exact conversation because he's approaching the age, and if he decides he wants to go to college and get a degree and so forth, by all means, I'm going to support him 100%. But he's asking me, that he wants to be extraordinarily successful. And he's always had these visions of being a billionaire and everything else. And he said, do I have to go to college to become a billionaire? And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, there is a societal norm that is embedded in me that wants to say, hey, buddy, you should go to college because that's what is accepted and that will take some pressure off you and whatnot. But the God's honest truth is, what are they going to teach you in a book that you can't learn right now anywhere else? And with ChatGPT, my daughter the other day was sitting on the couch and she wanted to learn something special in Spanish. And so she asked ChatGPT to teach her a certain thing in Spanish. And it did perfect.
If you could cheat the certification, so to speak, with a computer, then you're the one being cheated. So you think about it, passing the bar. How much time and money do you spend to pass the bar? Okay. If a machine can pass the bar, then that certification has no value at all. And so anything the machine could be used to cheat, you're actually being cheated on the education entirely. I believe that college serves a really great place as a great rite of passage. And somebody's going to invent the new rite of passage, like a much more affordable time and money rite of passage, and kind of not in conflict with another form of learning. And so I think that really that's what people are grasping for in colleges. It's our old rite of passage system.
Now, I do want to circle this around in business because there are so many applications and we can leverage ChatGPT in business. So I really want you to leverage it because it's about helping them become more efficient and more productive. And for somebody who's listening right now that says, how do I have my assistant or my salesperson or my COO or whatnot, how do I teach them how to use AI in their role? What is your response to that?
Oh, yeah. The first thing to do is just to start engaging with it. And I think doing is the best form of learning with it, and kind of telling them, hey, nothing's off the table, try anything. You do have to always, my number one starter tip is it's not going to ask you any clarifying or deepening questions. You can say, what questions would you ask me to give me a more informed answer? And it will tell you those questions. You just ask the same thing again with the additional information. The other really cheat code step is to ask it to talk you through an answer step by step. And there's two pieces to this. You'll really understand the answer better and how it derived it, which is going to fundamentally change what you do with it. But also, it has been shown that asking it to think through it step by step substantially increases the quality of the answer it gives you. Just asking it to do that yields a much higher result.
I think that's fantastic. And when my team asked, how do I learn how to use this in my role? My response was, ask ChatGPT. I am the COO of a XYZ company that's doing X amount of dollars in revenue. We're servicing this type of market with this many employees. And then how would you leverage or how would you use ChatGPT in my role?
Right.
It's far more intelligent than what you were talking about earlier, which is just people who are like, write me an article on how to do SEO for my company or something like that. So
yeah. It's interesting also when you look at giving, the ability now is coming out to be able to give it office documents and just ask it questions about the information. And it does a remarkably good job at that. And I think that's something that people will kind of quickly understand is a sort of cheat in business. Look at this document, and now my problem is this. This is all the information I have on it. What do you think I should do? You can't do it quite yet, still in beta, but it'll be coming out pretty soon for everybody.
now let's talk about what you've discovered and how you can use ChatGPT in business. Particularly, let's talk a little bit about Atlas and specifically the capabilities and what ChatGPT can do from running a business and answering questions inside the business.
Yeah. So our capability Atlas Up is, you can think of it just like ChatGPT can answer anything about things that are publicly known on the web. It scoured the web and figured out all those things, but it doesn't know anything about the inside of your business. And so what our solution is ChatGPT, but if it knew everything about the inner workings of your business. And the way it figures that out is it knows you have a bunch of third-party systems, usually SaaS systems, and we just automatically connect it to those things. So let's just say you use Rippling for your HR system. You use HubSpot for your sales and marketing system. You use QuickBooks and you use Jira and some other project management system. We connect to all of those. Now you can just ask you those questions. So you can ask really complex questions like, how much more runway would we have if we had 5% more penetration on our biggest customer and got rid of our two least performing salespeople? And that's a really complex question. And that's something that we have four enemies at Atlas Up. And the enemies are how many people were interrupted to get this information, how much human labor, hours were spent to get this information, how much time did it take to get the answer? Because so often we ask a question, but we have to make a decision before we actually get the answer. And then how accurate is it? We ask people and the information is often wrong because they're working from memory. They're not exactly sure how to look it up. They don't have access to everything they need, something like that. So what we want to do is have it be 0 people were interrupted. It took no human labor. We want you to get the answer to your question in less than a minute, which often the questions they are asking would take more than a week. And we want it to be 99.9% accurate. And so when you think about that question that I just asked, that is transversing a lot of different systems. It needs to go look at your bank account. There's no problem. They have that information. It needs to go look at your accounts receivable, your pipeline. It needs to go look at who are your two least performing salespeople. Oh, okay, it's Jane and Jeff. And okay, let's look at Rippling, our HR system. What do we pay them? And it's going to get all that back to you. And was probably that's a complex one, so that one might take about a minute and a half. And what's really cool is it also understands the nature of your business, and we get your mission, vision, values, your core values, what kind of business you're running. I ask Atlas Up, do we have a gender pay gap? And less than a minute, it spits back, yes, you have a gender pay gap. Men in this company get paid this % more than women, and this much dollars more than women. I instantly have this in the middle of the night. I didn't have to interrupt anybody or wait. And it anticipates that I'm going to want to know how are we performing against the national average. And it says, you're doing better than the national average. The national average is this % and this dollar amount. Of course, I breathe a quick sigh of relief. And then it says, however, based on your core values, very specifically this one, it says, I believe that you intend to hold yourself to a much higher standard than the national average. And
Wow.
I thought, wow, we're doing it. Like, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to understand who we are, how we roll. And basically said, listen, when has the national average been a good enough metric for you on something like this? It isn't. And here are 2 specific people that seem a little bit out of line, and maybe there's a good reason, but as the machine looking at it, I don't understand. I'm looking at the year's experience, their job responsibilities, and they're kind of grossly underpaid compared to their male counterparts. And if you want, here's a draft email to your chief of staff, Hannah, to start looking into it. And draft the whole email for me, just
so Atlas Up did all of that.
All of that.
Wow. That's pretty fascinating. Now, what about, you're giving access to ChatGPT or whatever it is. You're giving access to a lot of information that in the wrong hands could be disastrous for your organization. So should customer have security concerns?
Yeah, they should. Not with us. I can tell you how we mitigate that. And then I just want to talk, I don't want to make this a commercial for what we do, but talk about how people should be thinking about this when they're vetting the solutions at large. So intellectual property and proprietary information over to ChatGPT. People believe that because there's this kind of gross misunderstanding that when you're using a SaaS product or a tech product, you're either getting it for free in exchange for your information, like Facebook or Instagram, or you're paying for it and then your information is safe. Whatever you give them, they get to know about, they get to study, they get to use for their own advantage any way they want to. It adds to their research project. They are definitely smart enough to figure out who to attribute it to and to figure out whether you are authoritative, you're just giving it to it. And the part that is paid is just saying you have priority access to our research project. And so what we're doing is, one, we have special terms and conditions with OpenAI GPT-4 that says any information that we provide you, this is not part of your research project. This is our information and you're not allowed to use it. But 2, we just don't pass on their proprietary information. We leverage the might of the brain to teach us a thing, and then we use our own LLMs, which is our own AI, to be able to give the answer. A big part of our business was to start doing business with the United States Navy, the Air Force, the FBI, which is to show people, hey, not only is it not part of our business model to sell your data, but we have the chops to be able to secure your data. We do it for the Navy SEALs, and they damn sure don't want to give all their information over to ChatGPT. And we can do it for a small business too. And my overall point is when you're looking, you need to think about that when you're using ChatGPT, you're just giving it your intellectual property, and your people are like we do with that company to make sure that they're not just passing it on. It's really important stuff there, especially because they become the brain that knows what you know that people used to come to you for. And if you're giving it all your information, then they're not coming to you anymore. You've just devalued yourself. You're actually feeding the beast that's competing with you.
Damn. Now, I know we're pushing up against the clock and we've talked a lot, but where this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast, as it comes to AI, what would you say is your biggest, best piece of advice for our listeners in utilizing AI?
Yeah, I think that you're going to see this role. It started to already happen in the last 5 years where they use this kind of overglorified term of chief automation officer. And I really think this is a young, 23, 24-year-old who's very close to the executives in the business and sits in operations potentially and looks around at what are the problems happening. And its sole job is to figure out how do we not hire more people to get these jobs done, because that can kill a business. And some businesses just aren't going to be able to make it if they have to constantly hire more people. And you need somebody kind of owning this hat. And I know how to use automation to solve this problem, and I'm going to glue some parts together to do it. And it's one thing to ask everybody to get involved and think about it all the time, but they're also trying to get things done. And so I think making actually a relatively low cost hire somebody who wants to just be obsessed with what's coming out, because there is no real idea that there's a wealth of knowledge here. All of the knowledge is getting outdated every 90 days. So there's no person that's got 6 years experience in this. If you've been doing it the last 90 days, you've been doing it about as long as it matters. And, I think having a person whose job is just to focus on this, look at the friction points of the business, figure out what could be the highest leverage points, is going to be something that really blows up a lot of businesses and even solopreneurs who have somebody on top of these kinds of things.
Now, people want to learn more about you and Atlas Up. Where do we send them?
Yeah, send them to www.atlasup.com. And I'm also on Twitter at JereSimpson.
Awesome. So again, that's atlasup.com, and then Jere Simpson, Jere Simpson, over at Twitter. So that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. We got down and dirty with AI, talking about all the different ways in which we can leverage it for our own uses, for our companies, and where it might be going here in the future. So AI is one of those tools that we want to find more and more ways to work with it. I would highly suggest you forget this idea of trying to compete against it, because it will be a very tall, almost impossible order. Though, for those of you who know me, you know I don't like to use the word impossible. But the easiest way to get to the moon is going to be to stand on top of the rocket of AI. So again, that wraps up today's episode. This is Charles Gaudet with my good friend Jere Simpson, and I will see you in another episode.